Happy Sabbath. So we're going to continue our message, preparing for the end. Part 2 is what to expect and what to do. So last time I presented a message without resolution. I talked about doom and gloom, but what is the solution for us today? Last time was just a backdrop to the message, what I'll present today. What are we expecting to come? What can we learn from God's word, prophecy, and history? And what do we do? What is the solution to prepare for such a time before us? Are we ready not just spiritually, but also in our physical, earthly endeavors? Are we making plans according to the last days? This is what we will unpack in one short hour. So I will merely highlight as many points, each of which could be a study in itself. Last time we talked about a limit. The coming of the Lord, will not tarry past the time that the message is born to all nations, tongues, and peoples. So there is a limit. And what is that limit? 6,000 years. How do we know this? Am I just making up theories? What does the spirit of prophecy has to say? What does Ellen White define as a definite cosmic weak doctrine? Well, she says in The Great Controversy, so no better source, in the chapter Desolation of the Earth, for 6,000 years, Satan's work of rebellion has made the earth to tremble. He has made the world as a wilderness and destroyed the cities thereof. Further along we read, for 1,000 years, Satan will wander to and fro in the desolate earth to behold the results of his rebellion against the Lord of God. So, 6,000 years, Satan has worked his rebellion on this earth. This is clear. And during the 1,000 years, he will rest. And where have we heard this before? We talked about this last time. 6 days shall we labor, and in the 7th we shall rest, or Sabbath. So the typical week of 6 literal days is shadowing the antitypical cosmic week, where Peter says, 1 day with the Lord is as 1,000 years. So 6,000 years is the time given for Satan to work. Has Satan had any rest since the fall of Adam? No. It says Satan by no means is asleep. He is wide awake. So when Satan is chained to this earth during the millennium, he finally rests and no one is left to tempt. So why am I making this a point again? Well, because from our pulpits, new doctrine is being preached that time is not fixed or definite. Chronos, or chronological time, is evil, and Christ's coming should be interpreted by kairos, or opportune time. But we're missing the point. They both go hand in hand. Since 1844, there was kairos, or opportune time, for Christ to hasten his coming and come before the 6,000 years comes to a close. And we're going to unpack this during the study. But there was a chronos. There is a limit beyond mercy can no longer delay, and that is not 1 second beyond the 6,000 years. So last time we looked at how near we actually are according to inspiration. I won't repeat myself. All the statements and explanations can be found online in my Part 1 study. But I will make the point clearer. Do we know the day or hour? We do not know the day or hour. And I'm not preaching definite time because I don't know for sure. No human does. I'm providing a comprehensive study into the nearness of time. This is what Christ is asking for us to study and what the spirit of prophecy. This is to be our study, the nearness. And that's our focus for today. And last time we came to, let's say, approximately 2027. It could be a few years more, a bit less. The final events can be more rapid than we think. But you say that might be impossible. There's still a lot to happen. That can't happen in 2027. We're, only 2 years left? But not really. So the only act in the drama left is the last act. We are waiting upon the Sunday law. And then the plagues will fall in quick succession, and Jesus will come to take us home. So in the parable of the virgins, we are bidden, as my dad preached last Sabbath, not to sleep. Because to sleep is what? To sleep is fatal. We are to be the watchman who gives the loud cry and awakens Christ's people from the fallen churches, which is Babylon. What is the loud cry? The third angel's message. Do not worship or receive the mark of the beast. And what is the mark of the beast? Sunday legislation. So the shortness of time was our first half of the message last time. And the second half, we looked at how prophecy is being fulfilled today through the signs of the times. And we gave justifiable proof that everything is in place to establish the Sunday law. Project 2025, as evident in the title, is what the conservative political party in America wishes to enact this year. And within the project is a proposed Sunday law. This could be the very Sunday law that we are expecting, and it could very likely be coming this year. But there's nothing to worry about Project 2025. It's just a blueprint. Trump himself denied having any involvement in Project 2025. He said he hasn't even read it. Well, we saw how Trump appointed prominent government roles to key architects of Project 2025, and how much of the document has actually been implemented already. This is a tracker where we can see from the 900-page manifesto, Trump has enacted how much? 42% of the project ever since day one of his presidency. So is it just a coincidence, or is he following the plan? We are halfway through the year with almost half the project enacted. So what's next? Sky News in this article shows how the Trump administration is following every single point in Project 2025 through executive orders. So in other words, it doesn't even go through a process of vote. And Sky News asked the question after this, what could be next? If Trump continues to mirror Project 2025, the next agenda is its focus on family, which it says is in crisis. It adds, it's time for policymakers to evaluate family authority, formation, and cohesion as their top priority, and even use governmental power to restore the American family, with one of the authors saying every threat to family stability must be confronted. So what we're waiting to see is policies that now arise that address the family. And what is the foundation of the Sunday proposal in Project 2025? The family. A shared time off where all members can be together. That's what we read last time. We also have a new pope since our last study, Pope Leo. And what does this present pope say his issue will be? It is the responsibility of government leaders to work to build harmonious and peaceful societies. This can be achieved above all by investing in what? The family, founded upon the stable union between a man and a woman. So this statement is sending liberal Catholics into a tailspin because he calls the family a union between a man and a woman. So that this new pope wants to return the church back to its roots, back to tradition. So he's a conservative pre-Vatican II pope, pre-Vatican II Catholic, I should say. Just before we had a liberal pope who blessed sodomites. And when he was deceased, we were asking the question, who will be the next pope? Will he be liberal or will it be conservative? But it makes sense that they've gone with a conservative pope because Rome never changes. And they want to go back to the Catholic Church of the Dark Ages, meaning they want to go back to the old ways and traditions. This is what the Bible has to say. So we know this is going to happen. Here we see Pope Leo appearing on the Vatican balcony, wearing the same traditional papal vestments as did Pope Benedict when he was elected, and Benedict being an ultra-conservative. Francis, the liberal in comparison, only wore a simple white cloak. Pope Leo also had his first Mass half in Latin, dedicated the papacy to Mary, and he's promoting traditional family values. So he's leading the papacy back to the old ways. The church wants to return to the old ways. We can see this. Therefore, the wound is totally healed. So now Pope Leo is calling upon governments, in order to create peace, to invest in the family. We're hearing some buzzwords here. So here are the dots that we're connecting. Project 2025, the Sunday proposal, plus the Pope are wanting to invest in the family. Is it just this new Pope who was talking about the family? No, it's been an issue for a long time with the previous popes. Francis especially, who in his encyclical associated the family with Sunday rest. So what we need is synchronized day of rest in order to rebuild the family in society. This is what is being preached to us. Last time, we've seen great prophetic steps taken in America that are breaking down the wall between church and state. Now, here in this video, President Trump is hosting a national day of prayer, and what does he have to say? I'll have Eddie put up the video.
We're bringing back religion in our country, and we're bringing it back quickly and strongly. Because for America to be a great nation, we must always be one nation under God, a phrase that they would like to get rid of, the radical left. But Ben, I don't think we're going to let them get rid of that, right? We will make America rich and healthy again. And why don't we say rich, healthy, and religious again, okay? Shall I add that for this group? And you know, they work right out of the White House. They've never done that. That's never been done before. No other president allowed that. I think, you know, they say separation. They say separation between church and state, they told me. I said, all right, let's forget about that for one time. I created a historic White House faith office in the West Wing. This important office will work to protect vulnerable women and children, strengthen the American family, promote the dignity of work and choice in education. And I wanted them to have that office. Never happened before. I don't think that's ever happened before, right? The people of faith have never been allowed in the White House. We'll probably be sued tomorrow because they're going to say church, separation of church and state. Can't do that, right? But we'll win. Pam will win that suit. She wins him. She ultimately wins him. She gets him. I signed an executive order to combat anti-Semitism. It's a big thing. And I set up a DOJ task force, which is really a big thing, and Dan, you're going to be involved in it, to eradicate anti-Christian bias. And in just a few moments, I'll also be signing an executive order creating a presidential commission on religious liberty, which is really why we're here. The chairman is Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, whose idea this was, as well as Dr. Ben Carson. Ben, I don't have to say much about Ben. I don't have to say much. He's been with me from the beginning. You know, he was campaigning against me originally. Can I tell that story, Ben? You mind? Are you sure you don't mind? Because he was campaigning and he was very effective, and he was going up in the polls, and he looked at me about 3 or 4 debates in, and he said, you know, you're going to win by a lot, don't you? This was during 2016. And I said, what do you mean, Ben? What do you mean? You're campaigning. Don't say that, Ben. You're campaigning. You have a shot. He was a little bit behind, but it's pretty far enough. But he said, you know you're going to win. These people can't beat you. Nobody's going to be able to beat you. I said, why? He said, because God is with you. I said, that's nice. Then he said it once again in the church. Remember that, Ben? He pulled me over. He said, remember what I told you. God is with you. I want to thank you all for being here. We're bringing back religion in our country, and we're bringing it back, as I say, bigger and better and stronger than ever before. Thank you all very much.
So let's unpack this. This is a commission for religious liberty. This is what they want to implement. The chairman is Dan Patrick, and interesting, the vice chair is Ben Carson, an Adventist, and as we saw last time, an architect of Project 2025. So now, how would you define religious liberty? If it is to serve the common good, as the Catholic Church defines it, then the next step, according to Project 2025, is Sunday legislation. We'll have to see how things play out, but can we see how religion has been systematically being brought in? What is the purpose of the White House Faith Office? What did he say? To strengthen the American family. We're hearing the buzzwords. He also said its purpose is to promote the dignity of work and education. What is the dignity of work in the light of the Sunday law? That everyone has shared time off, no one overworks themselves, and everyone has a time of rest that can be spent for the family. Remember how he admitted that there could be even legal implication with the church and state. But what did he say? We'll win that one. Basically saying they know that they're joining church and state, but it won't be a problem. They will make it happen no matter what. What we're seeing right before our eyes is a fulfillment of prophecy. And when Pope Francis died, this is what he also had to say. As a mark of respect for the memory of His Holiness Pope Francis by the authority vested in me as the President of the United States, I hereby order that the flag of the United States shall be flown at half-staff at the White House and upon all public buildings and grounds. So this is interesting. A Protestant country lowers all its flag posts for the death of Francis, which is actually acknowledging the stature of the Bishop of Rome. And interestingly, the language Trump uses is implementing a mark of respect. And we know one day this country will implement the mark of authority to the Bishop of Rome. The warning signs are right upon us. So now, this was an introduction. I'm going to get into my study. This was a little recap. Do we know what is a survival guide? It is a resource that provides practical information and instructions to help individuals navigate a specific situation or environment where basic needs like food, water, and shelter are at risk. Survival guides offer invaluable knowledge on bush navigation, emergency preparedness, and survival skills. So do we know we have a survival guide for the end of the world? What is our survival guide? The Bible. Yes, the Bible and the spirit of prophecy. But more than a survival guide for our physical bodies, they are also a survival guide for our spirituality. So what chapter in the Bible and what book in the spirit of prophecy stand out as a survival guide? Did you know this? Matthew 24 is our survival guide. And did you know that Matthew 24 is in chronological order? We'll find that out in a second. And did you know the Great Controversy is the best commentary you can read on Matthew 24? It too is chronological, proving the fact that Matthew 24 is also chronological. How come? Because both start at the siege of Jerusalem and both conclude at the second coming and eternity beyond. So I'll have you open your Bibles to Matthew 24. We'll go through it in a second. But who remembers the title of our study? What is our title? Preparing for the End. And our subtitle was What to Expect and What to Do. Before I can tell you how to prepare for the end and what to do, we need to know what to expect. Otherwise, there's no foundation why God tells you what to do. So let's unpack the events mentioned in Matthew 24 and see what's before us. The parallel chapters to Matthew 24 are Mark 13 and Luke 21. And in this study, we'll combine these three chapters into an easy-to-understand timeline of events. Now, to understand Matthew 24, the disciples asked Jesus when will be the destruction of the temple and the end of the world, thinking that these two events are the same. They couldn't imagine their beloved temple being destroyed, except for at the destruction of the world. But this is where they were wrong. Jesus didn't correct their ideas yet, as they weren't ready to know, but answered his disciples by combining both events in his answer. So this chapter has a double application. We have to bear this in mind. We will primarily analyze Jesus' answer as applicable to the end of the world, as this is important for us today. But we will also see how the typical destruction of Jerusalem will be fulfilled in the antitypical destruction of the world, as they are a type and antitype of one another. So open your Bibles to Matthew 24, and we'll start from verse 6. We won't read word for word, but we will summarize in connection with the other Gospels. So first, we have the beginning of sorrows, which are seen in conflicts and disasters. Wars and rumors of wars, nation against nation. The word nation is actually the word ethnos, which means race. So we see racial tensions, kingdom against kingdom, famines, pestilences, troubles, great earthquakes. We have seen these things already. We have seen world wars, famines, plagues, earthquakes, the lot. Luke additionally adds fearful sights and great signs from heaven, which is important because it's not mentioned in the other Gospels. And why is this significant? Because this identifies the beginning for the time of the end, the point for the beginning of sorrows. So what were these signs? They were the Great Lisbon earthquake, the dark day, and the Great Leonid meteor shower. So the beginning of sorrows and the start of the time of the end is from the beginning of these signs, which is the Lisbon earthquake in 1755. These prophecies have been fulfilled, so we are presently waiting the next stage in the drama, which is in fact the last act, which is the Sunday law and the outpouring of the latter rain. This is in blue text as it is not mentioned in Matthew 24, but prophecy does reveal it in other places. We are on the verge of these events in our present day. This is also the time when the probation of the Church of God closes, while the probation lingers for the world who haven't heard the message. So how do we know there's a separate probation? The time of God's destructive judgments is a time of mercy for those who had no opportunity to learn what is truth. His hand is still stretched out to save, while the door is closed to those who will not enter. So from this point onwards, the final movements will be rapid ones, as says the pen of inspiration, and is indicated in the red timeline. So the way we know Matthew 24 is in chronological order is because it uses several temporal expressions in the chapter. All these are the beginning of sorrows. That's a temporal expression. Also the word then is an important little word used 9 times in the chapter, 4 times in Mark and Luke. Then is a temporal expression translated as tote in Greek. The X Tertial Dictionary of the New Testament says tote means in the sense of thereafter. It introduces that which follows temporarily. So in other words, events that happen in chronological order. So then there was persecution and a loud cry. God's people are afflicted, have hands laid upon, are persecuted, beaten, killed, hated of all nations, delivered to councils, synagogues. Today we'll call a synagogue a church, and the synagogue was also a courtroom in the time of Jesus. Prisons brought before rulers and kings. Then it shall turn for a testimony, and the Holy Spirit speaks through God's people. We have another then. Then we see the fruits of the tares. These are the unsealed brethren of the Seventh-day Adventists, plus the wicked of the world. All men are offended, hate God's people, love waxes cold. God's people are betrayed by parents, brethren, kinsfolks, and friends who cause God's people to be put to death. Many false prophets rise and deceive many. So not just the world, but the biggest betrayers of God's people are the SDARM members who are not sealed with the seal of God because their probation is closed. They will betray their church friends and family and become false prophets. But mercy still lingers in this point for the world, for those who make up the number of 144,000. They hear the message of God's people and they make up the number. Matthew 24:14 says, "The gospel shall be preached," which is the third angel's message, "to the whole world, and then shall be the end of time." The end of time, in other words, is the close of probation when no flesh can be saved. The 144,000 are sealed and spotless, and intercession ceases in heaven. The end of time is not to be confused with the time of the end. There's a difference in terminology. What does it mean to live in the time of the end, and what does it mean to live in the end of time? The time of the end is the time preceding the end, and the end of time is when probation no longer lingers. We have another then. Then is the final abomination of desolation, when God's people who see the sign leave everything behind and flee into the mountains without delay. God's people are warned about young children and to pray not to leave in the winter or on the Sabbath day. There's great tribulation and the days are shortened. The time will also be shortened during the great tribulation, according to verse 22, and it is represented in the black line. So we have another shortening of the time. What is the abomination of desolation? As the decree issued from the various rulers of Christendom against commandment keepers shall withdraw the protection of government and abandon them to those who desire their destruction, the people of God will flee from the cities and villages and associate together in companies, dwelling in the most desolate and solitary places. So it's the decree against commandment keepers, which takes away their rights. Then Satan impersonates Christ, false Christs and false prophets showing great signs and wonders that, if possible, would deceive the very elect. The eagles will be gathered around the carcass. So it's interesting to note that all this deception, including Satan masquerading as Christ, not all deception, but the biggest deception, will happen after the close of probation. And this is confirmed in the chronology of the Great Controversy. This is the passage, but we don't have time to read it. We'll continue on. Then is the 7 last plagues. The sun is darkened, the moon doesn't give light, stars fall from heaven, nations are distressed with perplexity, the sea and waves roar, men's hearts fail for fear, and the powers of heaven are shaken. Then is the second coming, the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. What is the sign? It's the little black cloud. Then all the tribe of the earth mourn, and the Son of Man comes in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. Then a great sound of a trumpet, the righteous dead are raised, and the angels gather the elect. There are, of course, a few more events that will happen that aren't mentioned in Matthew 24, such as the 1,000-year rest, where Satan is chained, and during that same time, the saints will judge the wicked. Then there will be the third coming of Christ with his saints and the new Jerusalem. The wicked are raised, and they plot to overthrow the city. Then the wicked receive their punishment and are ultimately consumed in hellfire. Some are consumed instantly, while others who sinned more burn longer, with Satan burning the longest. But in the end, everyone will be consumed. Then all sin is destroyed, the world is made new, and the righteous inhabit the new earth, and from there on is eternity. So here's the full timeline of events zoomed out, and there isn't a lot to happen left. Like I said before, we are just waiting for the Sunday law, and then all these events will fly by. We have even shortenings of time, so the time will be so short in these last periods. But it is important to note that our probation will end before the world's at the Sunday law, which is a scary thought because that's the next event before us. And not only 1 in 20, or even less than 1%, as my dad presented last time, are ready for the test. So now we know the events before us, we know what to expect, but remember that Jesus compares the destruction of the world to the destruction of Jerusalem. So we haven't gotten the full picture yet, because by looking back in history, we can know what is to come upon the world as through the events that unfolded in Jerusalem's destruction. So there were 2 sieges before Jerusalem was destroyed eventually in 70 AD, and this is history. In the first siege, the Roman armies under Cestius compassed the city and then retreated without apparent cause. Then the Christians saw the sign, fled to Jerusalem, and the city was sieged a second time under Titus, where there was no escape. So we'll go back to the first siege, because we want to understand the warning signs that the Christians saw, because these are the same warning signs for us today. The Roman army, when encompassing the city, stood on the holy place, this is what Matthew says, which is some furlongs outside the city, surrounding the walls of Jerusalem. They set up their pagan standards on this holy ground, which were depictions of their gods. Most notably were the eagle depictions on these standards. And remember, Jesus says, where the carcass is, there will be the eagles. The Christians inside the city saw the sign, saw Jerusalem compassed with armies, saw the eagles, and Jesus said, standing where it should not, on the holy place or on the holy ground. They knew this was the abomination of desolation. This is an important point. So why was the place outside the city walls called the holy ground? Well, it was because Nehemiah cleared that land outside the city for Sabbath consecration. Remember, Sabbath consecration. Remember the story when the merchants perched outside the city on the Sabbath, causing the people to desecrate it. So Nehemiah drove them away and told them there will be severe consequences if they came back. So when the Christians saw the Roman armies standing where they shouldn't on ground consecrated for Sabbath observance, this was the abomination of desolation. Just as the desecration of the Sabbath was the sign back then for Jerusalem, so antitypically today, the Roman armies of the Roman Catholic Church desecrating the Sabbath is the abomination of desolation. So here in this image, we have the Knights of Malta, which is a secret society in the Catholic Church. And they are the military of the church. That's why they're called knights. So in a sense, we can call them the modern-day Roman army. But Vatican in itself, the papacy, that is the Roman army of today. And just for your information, like a bit of fun fact, the Knights of Malta, they control all the big banks of the world, and their members are royalty. The royal family are all Knights of Malta, and influential people in politics and abroad are all members. So what nation today has the eagle as the seal of power? Who can answer this question? The United States, yes. This is where the carcasses will gather from the persecuting power of the US doing the bidding of the Roman army. So the time is not far distant when, like the early disciples, we shall be forced to seek a refuge in desolate and solitary places. As the siege of Jerusalem by the Roman armies was the signal for flight to the Judean Christians, so the assumption of power on the part of our nation in the decree enforcing the papal Sabbath will be a warning to us. It will then be time to leave the large cities preparatory to leaving the smaller ones for retired homes in secluded places among the mountains. So now we're starting to look into what to do on these issues. This statement was written in 1885 saying the assumption of power from America in the Sunday law was to be the warning for us. And this is important because in 1897, a few years later, Ellen White wrote statements that suggest this prophecy had already taken place. She says, earnest movements have been made here in the Parliament to have God acknowledged in the government of this nation. Earnest efforts have been made to prevent this, knowing that it meant nothing less than religious bigotry and oppression. When religion is mixed with civil government, it means much to Seventh-day Adventists. A union of church and state means a recognition of a spurious Sabbath and a failure to respect the conscience observance of the Sabbath of the fourth commandment. Same letter further down we read, the Protestant world have set up the idol Sabbath in the place where God's Sabbath should be, and they are treading in the footsteps of the papacy. For this reason, I see the necessity of the people of God moving out of the cities into retired country places where they may cultivate the land and raise their own produce. Thus they may bring up their children with sinful, healthful habits. I see the necessity of making haste to get all things ready for the crisis. In another letter, she writes, the pressure of the Sunday law has come and is coming. The government is trying to have God acknowledged in our constitution. Our people are making just as vigorous a stand as possible that it shall not be. We can see that which we have been talking about for the last 35 years, this law causing the Sunday to be exalted and making the human inventions take place of God's holy day is now being fulfilled, now being in 1897. So there's something that has already happened and something that is going to happen. In Jerusalem, there was the first siege, a retreat, and then there was a second siege with no escape. So inspiration is telling us that something has already happened. The first siege, which is the national Sunday law, has already happened. Then there was an apparent retreat. Then something else is going to happen in the future, the second siege, which we already established as the fullness of the Sunday law, where there is no escape from. So when was this first siege antitypically? Well, there was only one instance, when the US Congress proposed to establish a national Sunday law. That was in 1888, when the world witnessed the first siege, which was called the Blair Sunday Rest Bill. So in the 50th Congress first session, it was proposed to secure to the people the enjoyment of the first day of the week, commonly known as the Lord's Day, as a day of rest, and to promote its observance as a day of worship. So what they're asking for is church and state to come together. This is what Donald Trump just said, as we just saw, that they want church and state together. It has already been implemented in all their various executive orders, including having a religious office in the White House. And they're not afraid of legal action, this is what Trump said, because it will be taken care of. We have to be seriously worried right now, brethren. So the two Adventists at this time just laid great emphasis on the righteousness by faith, which is the righteousness of Christ, which is also the message to Laodicea. So who were these two men? Who can tell me? Who are these two men in this photo? Johns and Wagner, yes. This message was presented in the 1888 Minneapolis General Conference session by these two men, but the church rejected the message. Then Alonzo T. Jones went on to make a magnificent speech in Congress on the Sunday proposal, which was so profound that the Blair Bill actually failed. So the army retreated in apparent defeat. So was Christ ready to come in 1888? Christ could have hastened his coming ahead of time, like in 1844. And we know the statement where Ellen White says such. She says statements where Christ was ready to come in 1844. And Christ was ready to come again in 1888 if God's people were ready to receive him. And how do we know this? Let's look at the statements Ellen White was saying, climaxing around 1888. All right, 1856. I was shown the company present at the conference. She said the angels, some food for worms, so some dead, some subjects to the 7 last plagues, some will be alive and remain upon the earth to be translated at the coming of Jesus. This is she's talking about for her day. 1872. Because time is short, we should work with diligence and double energy. Our children may never enter college. 1876. It is really not wise to have children now. Time is short, the perils of the last days are upon us, and the little children will be largely swept off before this. 1885. In this age of the world, as the scenes of earth's history are soon to close, and we are about to enter upon the time of trouble such as never was, The fewer the marriages contracted, the better for all, both men and women. 1888. The hour will come, it is not far distant, and some of us who now believe will be alive upon the earth, and shall see the prediction verified, and hear the voice of the archangel, and the trump of God echoed from the mountain and plain and sea to the uttermost parts of the earth. 1892. The time of test is just upon us, for the loud cry of the third angel has already begun its revelation of the righteousness of Christ, the sin-pardoning Redeemer. So was Ellen White a false prophet? No, she wasn't a false prophet. She did use definite language that Christ was about to come in her lifetime. But like Jonah, who didn't see the destruction of Nineveh in his day because the city repented, Ellen White didn't see the coming of Christ coming in her day because the church didn't repent in 1888, when they rejected the message on the righteousness of Christ. What did we just read in that last statement? The loud cry in the revelation of the righteousness of Christ is being proclaimed by the third angel, but what use if God's people reject the message of the righteousness of Christ? It's not the angels who will give the message, it's going to be us. But where were the watchmen in Ellen White's days to proclaim this message? There weren't any. So this was a conditional prophecy. So what about today? We know Christ will no longer delay because there's no extension given to 6,000 years. So he's definitely coming soon. What counsel can we gain from these statements? If they were true back in 1888 for Christ to come, how much more true are they for us now? Firstly, we and our children may never enter college. We must come to a realization that our future plans for a long earthly life are realistically no more than as many fingers we have to count on our hands for the years. So should we waste years in college only for Jesus to come before we can make use of our degrees? Or should we plan our future towards Christ's soon coming? Secondly, a fact, and this is a fact we don't like to talk about, is the woe to parents and those with young children in the last days found in Matthew 24:19. It is not wise for us to be having children now, and little children will be largely swept off before this. Now, with a heavy heart, I say that this is very scary news to hear, especially for new parents and those planning to have kids, but we have to realize the reality of our situation and be prepared to expect such. We must seriously consider this warning, otherwise we will suffer great loss. And perhaps this is a good discussion topic also for our book club on child guidance. Thirdly, the fewer marriages to take place, the better. And why would Mrs. White say such? Because in this time, right before Christ's coming, there is a danger to be caught up in married life and put your spouse above eternal interests. Jesus said in Matthew 24:38 that at the end, those who will lose salvation will be caught up in marrying, just like before the flood. Also, the warning comes from the parable of the man who declined the feast because he just got married and he had to spend time with his wife. A wrongful marriage can be extremely dangerous, costing the salvation of both parties. And if you cannot with absolute certainty say that your marriage will uplift each other for heaven in the few short years remaining, better not get married at all. That's my advice. So after the opportunity was passed for Christ to come, what did Ellen White have to say? In 1901, she sadly wrote, "We may have to remain here in this world because of insubordination many more years, as did the children of Israel. Brethren, I can say for surety that it has been many more years since 1901, and the time is upon us now." So now let's talk about how we can prepare and what can we do. So it's been a long background before we could come to this point. After firstly we acknowledged the nearness of the times we're living in, then we looked at the signs of the times, confirming such, then the events ahead of us, and finally the history that will be our antitype. And finally we can look into country living and preparing for the end. Again, all these topics I presented was in a condensed form for the sake of time. So it's going to be the same for the next part on country living. I only provide some highlight quotes. And a book that should be our study for this time is the book called Country Living. And if the Lord is impressing upon your heart today that you need to prepare for the end times, and you realize your current situation is city living, I would encourage you to pay attention to these next few minutes and read this book, Country Living, for yourself. So Ellen White says in 1903, The time has come when, as God's people open the way, families should move out of the cities. The children should be taken into the country. The parents should get a suitable place as their means allow. Though the dwelling may be small, yet there should be land in connection with it, that it may be cultivated. So now, how do we prepare? What's number one, biggest of all? We must move where? Move into the country. It is time. The time to have leave the cities is in 1888, after we saw the first siege in America. So now what are the conditions to moving? Number one, find a place your means will allow. This means having no home loan tied to your property, because this will crush you in crisis. Number two, don't look at extravagant homes. Most likely the dwelling may be small. Again, purchase what your means will allow. Number three, there should be land in connection to the home where you can grow enough to be self-sufficient. The time of no buying and selling will be a crisis for those who are dependent on supermarkets. Being self-sufficient also means having your own water, having your own power or heat, not being connected to the grid. Okay, so what are the other points Ellen White reveals? The Protestant world have set up an idol Sabbath in the place where God's Sabbath should be. They are treading in the footsteps of the papacy. For this reason, I see the necessity of the people of God moving out of the cities into what? Retired country places, where they may cultivate the land and raise their own produce. Thus they may bring up their children in simple, healthful habits. I see the necessity of making haste to get all things ready for the crisis. So we've read the statement already, but now let's analyze it through the lens of country living. What points can we glean from this statement? Well, Ellen White specifies retired country places. So retired means secluded. In other words, if you see your neighbour's house from your own house, you're probably not secluded enough. And this will be apparent when crisis comes and neighbours will break into each other's homes looking for food and valuables. Just like the second siege of Jerusalem will be the crisis, inspiration reveals that Jerusalem is just a faint shadow of what is to come. And we know that when there was famine and starvation there, the mothers were eating their own children. So worse times than this are we preparing for. Bear that in mind. We are realizing more and more that the call to leave the cities is also talking about towns and suburbs, where living on even 1,000 square meter block, like in my instance, is definitely not secluded enough according to inspiration. Even though I'm in a country town, I'm not country living. So this is much more a message for me and my family as it is for you. What is necessary to make haste to get all things ready for the crisis? This means this message today is a time to get things ready before it is too late. Most likely there won't be many more warning messages after this, and it will be too late. What else is connected with country living according to this statement? Well, I've underlined there the healthful habits. So the health message is connected to country living. Are we prepared in our diet for the coming of the Lord? I'm vegetarian, you say. I'm right in my diet. Is that so? I don't even need to talk about sugar. Inspiration is plain. And cheese, though greatly loved in our community, I was a big cheese lover myself, isn't even regarded as food according to inspiration. And we see science proving inspiration right time and time again. In fact, inspiration was given before science even proved it right. That's how much we can trust upon the Word of God. So how about our cherished animal products? What from here is good to eat? Maybe that little bit of green there? Let the diet reform be, what's the word? Progressive. Let the people be taught how to prepare food without the use of milk or butter. Tell them that the time will soon come when there will be no safety in using eggs, milk, cream, or butter, because disease in the animals is increasing in proportion to the increase of wickedness among men. The time is near when, because of the iniquity of the fallen race, the whole animal creation will groan under the diseases that curse our earth. And we don't even need to talk about that. We know what they're injecting into animals, all the hormones, all the living conditions, that they're all crowded together, and disease just multiplies there. We are now in the time for strictest dietary reform. Eggs, milk, cream, butter are not safe. And as we're preparing for the heavenly Eden, knowing the times we are living in, so we must return to God's original diet created for man, which was a purely plant-based diet. So ask yourself, am I continuing in eating animal products showing that I don't believe the times we are living in? Am I that servant that says, my Lord delayeth his coming because I put appetite before God? Counsels on diet and food should be another resource we as God's people should study now to correct our habits of diet for Christ's coming. Okay, back to country living. But how far do we go? Where do we move? Do we go out in the middle of nowhere? The cities are to be worked from where? From outposts, said the messenger of God. Shall not the cities be warned? Yes, but not by God's people living in them, but by their visiting them, to warn them of what's coming upon the earth. So we are not to become exclusive or monastic. We must still work the cities, but we must not live in them. So in order that we can be an influence, we must live somewhere not isolated from a city. Let's say round about 2 hours max drive into a city. As God's commandment-keeping people, we must leave the cities. As did Enoch, we must work in the cities, but not dwell in them. Now, I don't want to be blamed for fear-mongering and excitement, so let me read you this statement. Here is a letter Miss White writes in response to hearing 100 to 200 people who were preparing to leave as soon as possible from Battle Creek. She says, your letter tells me, my brother, that there are many who are stirred deeply to move out of Battle Creek. There is need, great need, for this work to be done. And now, those who have felt at last to make a move, let it not be in a rush, in an excitement, or in a rash manner, or in a way that will hereafter they will deeply regret that they did move out. Take heed that there shall be no rash movements made in heeding the counsel in moving from Battle Creek. Do nothing without seeking the wisdom of God, who has promised to give you liberally to all who ask and who upbraideth not. All that anyone can do is advise and counsel, and then leave those who are convicted in regard to duty, move under divine guidance, and with their whole hearts open to learn and obey God. Let everyone take time to consider carefully. Not a move should be made, but that movement and that all that it portends are carefully considered, everything weighted. Let him not move hesitatingly, but firmly, and yet humbly trusting in God. So in the end, we're told not to hesitate. We still need to make haste to leave. That is clear. But don't make the mistake of leaving without counseling God. That's the biggest point of all. So why is this issue so important? Here's a photo taken from our own city, Melbourne. Is Melbourne safe? No, Melbourne is not safe anymore. But ere long there will be such strife and confusion in the cities that those who wish to leave them will not be able to. We must be preparing for these issues. This is the light that is given me. There will be a time when we want to sell, but we can't. And being in such closer connection with the ungodly, we will be in great peril for our lives, and more importantly, for our salvation. She says, more and more as time advances, our people will have to leave the cities. For years, we have been instructing that our brethren and sisters, and especially families with children, should plan to leave the city as the way opens before them to do so. Many, she says, will have to labor earnestly to help open the way. So sometimes we may think God is going to do a miracle for us. For example, a random man off the street knocks on your door and offers a price well above the value of your house. And this will be the sign, you say. But it won't be an easy process of moving out, and God most likely won't work in that way. Many, she says, many meaning the majority of us, God's people, will have to labor earnestly to help open the way, meaning we shouldn't be sitting back waiting for a miracle as such to take us from the cities, from the towns, from the suburbs into the country. We will need to endeavor, we will need to try every avenue from a human standpoint to sell our homes, and with God's help, He will provide the means from the sale that are necessary to purchasing a property in the country. So how is this going to happen? How do we sell? When should we leave? Where do we go? How will I find the means for purchasing such a property? We're living in a time of inflation, so how can I even afford such? I don't have all the answers. That's me being honest. And I can't tell advice for the specific situations of our people. I can only give advice given from inspiration. As those who can't afford such properties, especially new couples and those starting out in life, we can get the counsel from the message given. To parents, he sends the warning cry, gather your children into your own houses, gather them away from those who are disregarding the commandments of God and who are teaching and practicing evil. Get out of the large cities as fast as possible. And we are to help one another during these times, just as the early church helped each other with what little means they had. If you can't do it, let someone else help you. And above all, counsel with God to help you through this time of uncertainty. He will surely show you the way if you ask in sincerity. So what are the promises for us? If land is cultivated, it will, with the blessing of God, supply our necessities. We can be sure that what we plant, God will bless it to supply our needs, especially during famine and no buying. I love this statement here. It says, fathers and mothers who possess a piece of land and a comfortable home are kings and queens. And in closing, let us cling to this promise. Let's say it with me. God will help his people to find such a home outside the cities. This is the promise we have to cling to. God will help us. It doesn't say God might help us. He will. May we be prepared for Christ's soon coming. This is my wish and prayer. Amen.